Welcome back. There have been actually very few legislative victories in the first 6 months of the presidency of Donald Trump, but you can't say it has been boring. We are already have a grand jury. News this week, Special Counsel Robert Mueller convened a federal grand jury this week in Washington and is issuing subpoenas for everyone who was involved in that meeting at Trump Tower last year with a Russian lawyer. Meanwhile, Attorney General's is beginning an investigation aimed at cracking down on all those leaks. Anthony Scaramucci's 11-day career as White House Communication Director is over as General Kelly takes control of the White House staff. And good news, really good news, a Great Jobs Report, 200,000 new jobs in July. That cracks 1 million since Donald Trump took office in January. And joining us to make sense of it all is Zach Anderson, a political reporter at the Herald Tribune, Keith Fitzgerald, a political science professor at New College, and Joe Gruters, a state representative and Sarasota County Republican chairman, and the former chairman of the Trump Florida campaign. So, Joe, what do you make of the news that just came out in the last 24 hours that the investigation for Robert Mueller is now a grand jury investigation?
I'm not overly concerned about it, and I think two things. A, I think Jared Kushner was right when he said that the campaign was in too much chaos to really be colluding, to have any type of collusion with Russia, number one. And number two, I'm glad the process is moving forward because at the end of the day, I think Trump will be exonerated, everybody, and obviously people will know that that this is a fair investigation. I hope it's thorough, and I think that when he gets cleared, we can get past this and we can move on to really what's important to the American people, and that's continuing to create jobs and making sure that we have the best economy for all American families.
None of us here tonight are lawyers, but Keith, same question to you. Do you think that knowing that we have a grand jury now who are issuing subpoenas takes this to a different level?
I think it definitely does. I think that people will look back on this week and say this is the week when the Trump presidency essentially failed. The fact that they're digging into financial records, not just of him, but his family members, now means that even if this doesn't result in an impeachment of the president, he's going to be dealing with it nonstop until the end of his term. It's going to be a quagmire, and it's going to pull him down. You talked about the chaos of the campaign. You're correct. Now there's chaos in the White House, and that's really what scares me more than anything partisan about this, is that if the president has no credibility, it invites problems abroad. People who may want to test our resolve on a variety of different issues, and it makes the government run very poorly, that we don't have appointments for many positions.
What makes us weak abroad is when we have these leaks and we leak these interviews and these discussions that the president has with foreign leaders, because that's going to limit our president's ability to talk to foreign leaders, because some of them may be afraid to talk to them because they're afraid it's going to be voiced out over the concerns. That's the real problem. We should focus on these leaks, get control of it, put them in jail, and move on.
I wanted to do the leaks in the next block, Joe, but I will say this. McClatchy reported 7 months into the Trump administration, the world's diplomatic community has gone from throwing its hands in the air to now leaning back in their chairs and laughing, albeit morosely, at Trump's cringeworthy displays of diplomacy during the campaign. Said one Mexican official, he is the opposite of Teddy Roosevelt. He speaks loudly and carries a small stick.
What's going to happen is Donald Trump is going to end up being the greatest president this country's ever seen. I think you could already see it with the economy. You mentioned it yourself, 1 million jobs, unemployment down to 4.3%. People don't, a lot of people understand, especially the middle class, they can feel it in their pocketbooks. The stock market being up as high as it is, retirement accounts being up, and when you give people the ability to have financial security with better jobs and a better economy, everybody wins. And I think that if given the opportunity, the problem in D.C. is the Democrats are consistently throwing these bombs. Every time Trump gets any type of momentum, it's disruption. We've had the same thing since he's been sworn in. I think it's all like a deep state game where they're trying to disrupt this whole presidency.
Hold on.
That is such a ridiculous
argument. Hold on 1 second. It's not the Democrats that could be in the grand jury here.
No, we're not talking about. I'm talking about the leaks and the disruption and not allowing him to serve as a president. Because you may not like him, but he is our president,
the leaks
and we should support him and move him on.
The leaks are not coming from Democrats. We just had a presidential administration to win 8 years with almost no major leaks. This presidency is leaking like a sieve, and most of it is coming from within their own ranks.
All right,
It's
let's just
It's
get
the holdovers.
One of the really
let's just
interesting
get Zach in
things,
here in the
yeah.
first, because I always ask you, at what point does it start to affect support here on the Sun Coast, which is Trump country?
Well, the grand jury, it sounds bad, you know, the grand jury is investigating him, but my understanding of a grand jury is this was going to happen no matter what with the special counsel. I mean, this is pro forma. They bring in the grand jury, they use that to gather evidence, they use that to subpoena people. A grand jury does not mean that he's going to be indicted or even charged or anything like that. All it means is that the special counsel is doing his job, but it sounds bad. And I think it could be politically damaging for him because it's just another black cloud sort of hanging over his head with this grand jury.
We will have more on this discussion. We are only scratching the surface. We'll continue right after we check the weather. Stay with us. Welcome back. President Trump is off on a 17-day vacation after a week that we learned that a grand jury is investigating the Russia story. Leaked transcripts from phone calls between the president with world leaders and the U.S. economy has added over 200,000 jobs in July, bringing the total to 1 million jobs added in Trump's first 6 months in office. Joining us is Zach Anderson, a political reporter for the Herald Tribune, Keith Fitzgerald, a political science professor at New College, and Joe Gruters, a state representative and Sarasota County Republican chairman and the former chairman of the Trump campaign. I want to stay on the leaks issue for a while because obviously, you know, you could slice and dice this issue in a couple of different ways in terms of disclosing classified information, which I don't think anybody would be in favor of, but also when it comes to the discussions with world leaders, whether you're a Democrat and Republican, and I heard a lot of conversation about this today, it's hard to find anybody who would say that a president should not be able to have confidential conversations with world leaders that don't get out to the press. Keith?
No, I totally agree with that. I mean, there's no justification for leaking material like this. The fact is that the news about it had already been out, so it's almost gratuitous to leak the...
Except for Trump denied some of the things that were reportedly said, including about his conversations with the Mexican
Yeah, that's
president.
true. But, you know, if that did come from within the security state, it's a very upsetting thing. I think most of the actual leaking is coming right out of the White House itself because they're warring factions and nobody is completely in charge of the ship. But there's no excuse for any leaks like this. No president anytime should be facing that sort of a thing. It doesn't mean that the content wasn't embarrassing because it was.
Joe, I'm going to let you jump in here, but you know, we first want to report again that the Attorney General Jeff Sessions today announced the investigation into these leaks. Specifically the leaks of classified information, but it is not true, is it not, that a lot of these leaks have not come from the security state or whatever, but has come from warring factions in the White House?
I don't think that's the case. I think what's going to happen is I think when Jeff Sessions conducts his investigation, I think they're going to find out exactly who it is. I think it's going to be holdover Obama appointees, holdover Obama employees, people that are trying to undermine Trump's presidency. And the problem with all these leaks is you're not only undermining Trump's presidency, you're undermining our entire democracy in our country, and it needs to stop. These guys need to be punished. It's people should go to jail, and I think we'll get to that conclusion. I hope that it happens sooner than later, but it needs to happen.
Here's the question. Obviously, this was General Kelly's first week on the job as the new chief of staff at the White House. He is trying to bring a more disciplined approach to the West Wing, but according to the New York Times, he has privately acknowledged that he cannot control the president and that his authority would be undermined if he tried and failed. Instead, he is intent on cosseting Mr. Trump with bureaucratic competence and forcing staff members to keep to their lanes. As part of the problem is that there were too many power centers in the West Wing.
Well, I think it's a good idea. You know, I think that General Kelly is the perfect person to have in there, and to have people stay in their lanes just makes perfect management sense, because you don't want people getting into other areas they shouldn't be focusing on. Everybody has a specific role at the White House. They should be following those rules. And I think General Kelly was the perfect person to put in there, and I think he's going to bring the discipline that's needed. And as a result, I think we'll have a much more efficient and effective White House moving forward.
Well, I think that it's really stands out that you just said you think it's a good and appropriate thing that we have a retired general cosseting the commander-in-chief of the armed forces. That is not the way our system of government is supposed to work.
Well, I'm saying what you said, Alan, is he was brought in to say that for individual staff members to stay in the specific lanes, and that's exactly what they should do. I don't think he's going to be able to control Donald Trump. I think Donald Trump won exactly for the same reason what he's doing now. It's because he does use Twitter. It's because he communicates directly with the American public. It's because people were tired of the same old Washington recycling of politicians, no matter what side you're on. And people wanted a difference. People wanted a change. They wanted to drain that swamp. And it's tough to do it. So Trump is trying.
One of the interesting things about General Kelly, a lot of Republicans are sort of indirectly acknowledging how chaotic the White House has been by saying they're so relieved that General Kelly is in here and that he's going to bring some order. I heard that from both of our local congressmen, Vern Buchanan and Tom Rooney, who represent parts of Sarasota County, that they were very relieved that General Kelly is going to come in and establish some order in the White House. That's sort of indirectly acknowledging that it has been chaotic and that it's a backhanded way of sort of criticizing the White House to some extent and saying you really haven't had your house under control. So it just shows how tumultuous things have been and that people are really hopeful that somebody can get this under control.
And I want to ask you about another subject, but I want to ask you first, Joe, if that's the case, if part of the problem here has been over the last 6 months, it has been so chaotic within the White House, is that not reflective of the president's management itself?
Well, I think Donald Trump obviously he's never held elected office before, and I think that there is somewhat of a learning curve, and I think the different people that were in the White House, I think there were factions, I think they were fighting with each other, and I think that's kind of what Donald Trump's management style probably was out in the private sector, where he liked competition. But I think now, moving forward, he sees that for exactly the same thing, that people need to stay in their lanes and need to focus on specific jobs, and I think we're going to be much better off. Right. But I think Donald Trump has learned a lot already. I think he's doing a great job. But listen, all you got to do is look at the economic numbers. 1 million new jobs, 4.3% unemployment. People are making money.
Yeah. What we have not seen in the first 6 months is much in terms of legislative victories. The health care issue, I mean, we don't have to talk about that in nauseum again, but you have a Republican Senate, a Republican House, and they have not been able to repeal. Hold on. So, you know, Zach, you have talked to Congressman Buchanan and Congressman Rooney about this, and, you know I talked to Vern myself. He was so confident by this summer you would have tax reform. Yeah. He must be frustrated at this point.
Yeah, I think he is. You know, the president seems very defensive about this. I think many conservatives are pretty defensive. You know, they want Trump to be successful, so they point to things like his Supreme Court appointment or that he's rolled back some regulations. But the reality is that we have total Republican control of the government, and they have a very ambitious agenda to repeal and replace Obamacare, to do tax reform, to do these other things. And they failed at the first big thing. It's 6 months in. We're in August. They have a month of recess here. They come back in September. They've got some huge deadlines for fiscal issues like passing a budget and raising the debt ceiling. And there's real questions about whether they can get anything big done by the end of the year. I know Vern Buchanan and Tom Rooney are very concerned. You know, they believe that there were some big promises made. I think, you know, there's been a lot made about pressure from the left, but I think they're getting pressure from their base, from the right, saying, hey, we gave you guys control. What are you doing with it? So,
and here's the question, because if you listen to the president, he will say that he has accomplished more in the first 6 months than any president in history. And then, you know, after we're discussing what was not done, what are the people who are watching this right now, how do they jive the two things together?
I think the American public at the end of the day wants to make sure that they can be good providers for their families. They want jobs, they want a strong economy, and that's exactly what Donald Trump has done. He's brought optimism that hasn't been in this country in a long time, no matter who's been president, and what he's doing is he's encouraging businesses to invest in factories here. He's putting people back to work. And at the end of the day,
I would like to ask the caller, you're talking the whole time. I want to ask you a question. Name for me the major economic policy change that has been brought about by this administration. And the answer is none. We're operating off of the Obama economy because this president has been incompetent to get his act together, to even put forward a plan. Certainly no discussion of broader issues like tax reform. What's been revealed this week is this presidential administration is a big hot mess, and the problem starts with the president himself, who is not temperamentally or attitudinally well suited for the job and seems apparently to have a lack of either commitment to American institutions or fundamental understanding of how they
still,
operate.
Keith, we do hear today, and the people watching this right now hear 200,000 new jobs in July, over 1 million since January. He is the man in charge right now.
Right, and you know, fair enough. People have a sort of magical thinking attitude about the relationship of the economy and the president, whoever it is. But let's just ask a simple question. What do you call those numbers in the Obama administration? The answer is an average month. I mean, that was the rate of economic growth in both jobs and in GDP growth, pretty much average for the entire Obama administration after about September of 2009.
Unemployment's lower than it's ever been in a long time. Million new jobs since he took office. People, what Donald Trump has done is he's brought optimism to the American worker, to American businesses, and that's what's driving our economy, and hopefully it will continue to be so.
The economy's driving exactly as it was before he took over.
Let's take a quick break, and when we return, we'll have final thoughts, so stay with us. Welcome back. A grand jury, a leak investigation, White House shakeup, a good jobs report. Our guests join us right now for final thoughts. We did not even mention Anthony Scaramucci this week. Joe, what was that all about?
Well, I think it was a difficult transition at the White House for sure, and obviously his short tenure proved that he wasn't the right person for the job. I think that the White House will continue to bring in better talent, and I think he just started and ended on the wrong note, and it's unfortunate because my guess he's probably a very accomplished and good overall communicator, and given a different set of circumstances, he may have done a wonderful job, but I'm glad we could put that behind us and focus on the future.
Keith?
Well, obviously the Mooch episode was a big disaster and everybody knows it, and it goes right to the question of whether the president has appropriate temperament and judgment to do his job, because that was his call from start to finish.
I always wonder how all this is playing out on the Sun Coast, and as you look we're not far away from another political season. You see nationally some polls showing the president's approval rate going down to 33% according to the Quinnipiac polls. I know that we don't have a lot of polling here on the Sun Coast, but Zach, what is your gut in terms of where things stand here?
Well, obviously, he's probably doing a little bit better here because this is more of a Republican-leaning area than, if you looked nationwide. But I think he has some issues. I was talking to Congressman Rooney, and, he came out, they're elected officials, Republican elected officials, are reluctant to really criticize the president because they realize that about 75% or so of Republicans are still with him. They still support him. But Congressman Rooney did sort of indirectly criticize him, one by saying that he was glad that Kelly had come in to take over as chief of staff, and he also said that he thought Scaramucci was a disaster. So he obviously was upset about that choice, and it just shows that there are things that Republicans are very upset about what Trump has done, and that they don't feel like he's maximizing his potential here.
But does either Congressman Rooney or Buchanan start to get concerned about their prospects for the midterms, even though the president's support may be less than it was?
That's a good question. I think they'd be a lot more concerned if there were decent candidates running against them. That might be a question for other people, but it'll be interesting to see if Democrats think that Trump is dragging these candidates down and run some good candidates against them.
Sounds like another show, which we will get to some other time. Gentlemen, thank you. But before we go, we want to share with you what some of our viewers are saying about last night's topic, student loan debt. Many jobs require a college degree, but what's the future for those forced to take out tens of thousands of dollars in student loans to get an education? Helen writes, for what they charge, it would be nice if they actually received an education that would help them find their niche in life. Milan adds, I feel the education in the USA is like a maze where most students get lost with thousands of dollars trying to find the exit and the promise and reward. Ina closes out by saying one way to avoid taking out so many loans is to commute or take classes at a community college and transfer credits. It is possible to graduate college and not owe so much money. Well, if you'd like to join the conversation about tonight's topic, just visit our Facebook page at facebook.com/news@7. And FYI, our roundtable discussions are available on demand. They're available on Apple TV, Amazon Fire, and Roku. Thanks to all our guests for being here tonight. Zach Anderson is the political reporter for the Herald Tribune. Keith Fitzgerald is a political science professor at New College, and Joe Gruters is a state representative and a Sarasota County Republican chairman.